First of all, welcome to Marin Coalition. My name is Scott Pinsky. And my first reminder is please turn off your cell phone, Mr. Keys. And anybody else, if you have a cell phone, it would be a great time to go ahead and take care of that business. I only have one program to announce coming up in the future, and that is in September. We're going to be on our summer hiatus after today's program, and so we will be taking the summer off and coming back in September. We don't have a date yet, but the September program will be our customary election preview with the dynamic duo of Dick Spotswood and Greg Brockbank giving us their take, for better or worse, on politics. So we'll let you know when that's scheduled as soon as we have that on the calendar, but look for that in September. If you're not on our email list and you would like to be, just reach out to me or one of our other board members here and we'll get you on our list. The only other piece of business really before I introduce our speaker is to remind you that we are a all-volunteer nonprofit 501c3 organization here in Marin. We've been in existence for 50 years. And the way that that happens is through donations by folks like yourselves who keep us going and help our mission to remain vibrant here, presenting these topics to the Marin community. So if you have not volunteered to make a donation and you would like to do so, we welcome that. You can do that on the website or reach out to one of us and we'll help you figure out how that happens. And thanks for those of you who have supported us in the past. All right, now we're here to talk about the Buck Institute Healthspan update on research that Dr. Verdin and his crew have been doing. So let me just give a brief intro and then we'll turn it over to him. The president and CEO of the Buck Institute for Research on Aging, Dr. Verdin leads the longevity research at the Institute, which is a hot topic in the developed world. And it's a particular interest here in Marin County. Many of you probably know that demographically, Marin County is the oldest county in California. Hope I'm not giving any inaccurate information there, for better or worse. It also happens to be rated as the healthiest county in California. Go figure. So you got those two dynamics going on. The Buck Institute is at the forefront of efforts to help us all to live better longer. And today, Dr. Verdin will discuss the latest research at his institute aimed at substantially improving the outlook for better health as we age. He'll discuss health span versus lifespan, interventions for longer life in the pipeline in the medical community, clinical trials that are in play at the Buck Institute, and the fact that genetics are not destiny, that the impact of lifestyle choices also make a difference. Dr. Eric Verdin is the president and CEO of the Buck Institute for Research on Aging. He provides strategic vision and leadership to researchers in 20 laboratories, all of which are focused on understanding aging as a malleable process that underlies almost every chronic disease affecting the developing world, or the developed world, excuse me. The Buck's mission is to end the threat of age-related disease for this and future generations. Dr. Verdin was born in Liège, Belgium. He received his MD from the University of Liège. He did his training at Harvard Medical School. Prior to coming to the Buck Institute, he was a senior investigator and the associate director of the Gladstone Institute. He's also a professor at the University of California, San Francisco. He's published more than 280 papers. He holds more than 15 patents. He consults with multiple biotech and pharmaceutical companies around the world. He's in the top 1% of the most highly cited scientists in the world and a global thought leader in the field of aging. It is my honor to once again introduce and present Dr. Eric Verdin.
Thank you very much, Scott. And I'd love to hear my name being pronounced the right way. One time, I'll just tell you a little story. My mom, who grew up in Belgium, French speaking, she calls my phone and it's Eric Verdin. And she's always upset. She says, "Who's that Eric Verdin?" I feel like a chicken that has hatched a goose or something. And so and Scott's accent is actually perfect. So not only for Verdin, but also for Liège, my hometown. So I'm delighted to be here and look forward to the next hour we're going to spend together. What I plan to do is to have divided my presentation in two parts. First, I want to bring you up on some of what's happening in the aging field. Really give you a brief overview of some of the things we've learned over the last few years. In the second part, I'll speak a little more in details about what the buck is all about, what we are doing. Can you raise your hand if you have visited the buck? Oh, wow. Okay, well, I can go home now. No, that's great, actually, because one of the things that really struck me when I joined, which was 7 years ago, is the fact that still so many people in Marin do not know about us. And we, or Napa or Sonoma, we are the only research organization in all three counties. And as far as I'm concerned, we are a true gem in our community in terms of what we're trying to do. And hopefully when I'm done, those of you who have not visited will come to visit. And those of you who've been there before will come again and help us and support our mission. And I should say that we are a non-for-profit organization. So the support of our community in all matters, not just financially, but also in terms of work, in terms of spreading the words about what we're trying to do is really critical. Oh, my slides have disappeared.
Oh, goodness. I will get it back up. And what happened? I don't know.
So you get 2 copies of these. If you don't see me here, you know.
I don't know why it disappeared. You have the printer, right?
Yeah.
It
Very
might not,
good. So
it might not work.
Can you hear me well? Is the mic? Okay. The title of my talk is "What is Longevity?" and an update about what we're doing.
May not work for you.
Okay, so first I want to share with you a number of breakthroughs that really are animating our work and the whole field. Something really dramatic changed about 25 or actually 30 years ago almost. Early 1990s to 1996. A number of labs around the world realized that aging was actually a process with somewhat of a program. Before this, aging was thought as sort of a degradation of, every one of us has 14 trillion cells, individual cells. Imagine the complexity. And the vision of aging before was something goes wrong in this cell, something goes wrong in this cell. Think about a big brick wall in which the erosion, the wind will do some damage. Eventually, one brick will fall off the wall, and it's okay. The integrity of the wall is still there. And then another brick will fall. Eventually, a hole is going to appear. The wind is flying faster through that hole. Eventually, the whole wall falls down. That was the vision of aging. When you think about this from an intellectual point of view, there's really nothing you can do. What people about slowing down the process, it was random. And aging is in parts driven by all of the interactions, the world that we live in. You know this, but you can go out in the sun, you will be exposed to UV light. We put sunscreen because we know UV light is a damage. It damages your DNA. You got gamma rays. Anybody has seen the aurora borealis recently? So that's it looks beautiful, but actually, as a scientist, I don't really like this. What it means is we have huge solar flares, and that means gamma rays, which is much more toxic than UV rays, irradiating all of us. And that's what you're seeing in the air. Breathing oxygen. Oxygen is a toxin. It is critical for life, but it is an oxidant. Oxygen, oxidants. You probably all know about antioxidants. So the oxygen that we breathe actually induces damage in every one of our organs. Gravity pulling down on our muscles, on our joints. All of these external influence are the driving factors about aging, and there's nothing we can do about them. Okay, so that's really the first thing to know. We're not going to be able to, we can put sunscreen. That's probably the only thing we can do. Or you could walk around with a lead shield to protect yourself against gamma rays. What we had not realized and what really changed about 30 years ago is that we have repair processes that are constantly fixing us. Okay, so as you walk through life, your DNA gets damaged, your proteins get damaged, everything gets damaged, but we have these repair systems that allow us to actually pretty much stay pretty much the same. And people talk about aging. It is a very slow process. You can't see it from one day to the next. But for example, if you were to miss one of the repair system, and there are human mutants who are lacking DNA repair, they live 18 years on average because they accumulate mutations. These mutations lead to cancer, their skin ages, and so that's pretty. And so this is true for DNA, but it's true for all of the other mechanisms that are linked to damage, including oxygen damage. So that going back to the vision of the wall, there's the wall that's being eroded. That's the external forces, but there's what we had not realized. There's an army of masons behind that are constantly fixing everything. What people realize in the mid-90s is the fact that these masons can be activated. If you give them a good boss, they'll work harder and they will fix everything. And so that's the field that we're working on. How do we activate these mechanisms? How do we protect ourselves against these processes? So these discoveries in the mid-90s really led to, first, nobody believed it, that as good scientists, we are questioning everything we see, especially the work of our colleagues. And this is one of the most amazing things that I always tell people about scientists. You have to be creative, and people are incredibly creative about their own work. All my colleagues, but when it comes to the work of your other colleagues, we are so skeptical. And this is one of the joys of doing science, is really always sitting kind of this schizophrenic position in terms of what you think. So breakthrough number one is the identification of these masons, these mechanisms that protect us against damage, and our ability to activate them. So essentially what we've done, and so initially, this is the work, by the way, that led to the creation of the Buck Institute. Buck was founded in 1999, as I'll show you. And this was at the time, people thought, an institute on aging? This is crazy. And first, the field of aging was considered the backwater of science because it just could not be studied using the molecular tools. And all of a sudden, people were identifying mutations, single mutations. So your genome, my genome is about 3 billion base pairs. Think about a book with 3 billion characters. You change one letter in this book, and you can increase the lifespan of a little worm by 3-fold. That just blew people away. And when I look back at these data, it's still amazing. So there's something that we can change about aging, and I call these dials. So all of these, what was thought to be an exception at the beginning became a subject of study. People went, okay, we found this mutation that increases lifespan. This other one, it's the exception. No, it's not the exception. Right now, just in many of the organisms that we study, we have 700 of these dials, these places that we can trigger. And the bottom line is, if you can make a mutation that increases lifespan, that probably means that you can find a drug that's going to be doing the same thing, or you can find an intervention that's going to be doing the same thing. And so the Buck was founded on that promise. Let's just study aging in a really comprehensive manner. So incredible insight, by the way, for the people who really came up with the idea. For those of you who are here, you probably remember the battles that led to the formation of the Buck, and the idea of creating actually an institute for research that would benefit the whole world was the incredible insight. It transformed this from, we don't want philanthropy money to go to Marin. They're living longer than everybody else. They're richer than everybody else. So why should they get philanthropy dollars? The idea of transforming this money into something that humanity would benefit from, I think, was incredibly insightful, and we're still benefiting from it. So here's a classical experiment that shows you not only mutation can actually change lifespan, but also interventions, external intervention. This is where it gets more interesting. Obviously, we're not doing gene editing of humans to increase your lifespan. Maybe we will in the future, but we're not doing this. It's not part of the picture. But here's a classical experiment that shows that by a simple intervention, you can actually really dramatically change the lifespan of a mouse. So for those of you who are not used to seeing graphs, I'll just go through it. It's actually quite simple. You start with 100 mouse. This is the 100 here. And then you follow them over time. Let's look at the non-CR here line. So you follow them over time. Every time a mouse dies, the line goes down. So by the time you reach this point here, all of the mice have died, and you have a maximum lifespan in mice of about 36 months. It varies a little bit from mouse strain to mouse strain. And using this type of experiment, you can actually, I'm going to switch hands. You can actually derive sort of a median lifespan. This is the time at which about 50% of the mice will be dead, and a maximum lifespan. Now, these are mice that we grow in the laboratory in little boxes. Not really an ideal way to grow old, but that's the experimental system that we have. What this experiment is showing you, if you measure how much these mice are eating, you can do this simply by weighing their food. And you say, okay, what happens if I cut down the amount of calories that they eat by 25% or 55% or 65%? What happens to them in terms of their life expectancy? And I think it doesn't take a real deep scientist to understand that you can see them living longer and longer the more you restrict the amount of calories that they're eating. So that's a process called calorie restriction. And it really formed the foundation of a lot of the field of aging research, because it showed this incredible life potential. You can see here, I mean, this is the life potential that's missed if you're eating what we call ad lib, as much as you want. Now, the obesity crisis that we have right now in the US is the opposite of this. People are eating too much, they're obese, and lifespan shortened. So we see exactly. Now, there's also, based on these types of data, a number of humans have actually taken upon themselves to go on calorie restriction. And I've met many of them, and they're not a funny bunch. One of them, just to tell you a little anecdote, wrote a book in which he goes on for 3 pages while meditating on chewing a single blueberry. And so some colleagues have actually said, you know, calorie restriction might not make you live forever, but it will certainly feel that way. So, so this is one way to get a very long life. So anyway, really profound experiment in terms of what it means for our ability to show that aging is malleable, it's plastic, it's not predetermined. And now, so what is the type of work that a scientist would do with this type of data? Well, we have experimental model systems. The little worm here, C. elegans, lives 21 days. It's about the size of a comma on a regular book, so it's a little tiny worm. We can manipulate them genetically. They have 900 cells. We have 14 trillion. So imagine the level of complexity. The beauty is that we know for every one of these cells what they're doing. We have a full mapping, a full understanding. This is an organism that we would know a car engine, basically. The Drosophila, that's a fruit fly. It's a little more complicated, actually much more complicated than the worm. It lives about 70 days. Now, the beauty of using these organisms, we can manipulate them genetically. We can do anything we want with them. We can change every gene in whichever way we want. And with a lifespan of 21 days or 70 days, imagine how many experiments we can do, especially when we compare it to humans. You know, it's very hard to do longevity studies in humans. The mice are closer to us, actually pretty close to us in terms of their genome, close to 90% of a mouse. It's pretty much the same genes. There are some subtle differences, but they live 3 years, so you can do lifespan studies. Now, what we can do is subject everyone of these animals to calorie restriction. All of them will increase their lifespan. And then this is the readout. And what we can do, we can start making mutations in many of the genes and try to see, okay, what is necessary in the organism for calorie restriction to work? Think about it in a car, you have the accelerator, you have You have the engine, you push on the accelerator, the engine revs, and you try to figure out what are all the pieces in between. So this is what we can do using the tools of molecular genetics in the lab. And so we've done this, and this is some of the parts, really small parts that we've identified. The first thing that is interesting is we have what we call pathways. So we identify this protein and this protein and this protein, and we know they are linked. So it gives us confidence that whatever parts so it's not only we found the accelerator, but we found the carburetor, and we found the gas line, and we found other things in between. I'm sorry if I'm only talking to the guys here in the room in terms of my car analogy, but so pathways was really the first finding. The second finding was these pathways are conserved in all of these organisms. So whether you look in C. elegans or Drosophila or the map or mice, you find the same pathways. And I'll give you an example here. This one, TOR. Again, there's a TOR protein in every one of us, in every one of your cells. And in every one of these organisms, they're slightly different, but they do the same thing. And you can see the evolution traces. In every one of those, TOR is really critical. Now, what's TOR mean? It means target of rapamycin, and this is where it gets even better. Because rapamycin is a drug that when we give it to animals actually increases lifespan across all organisms. So we're at a point today, just to give you, this is really a snapshot. I mean, there are thousands of papers. You can imagine the amount of work that's been done on this. Thousands of papers, thousands of scientists. But the idea of rapamycin being a drug, we know its target. The target has been identified completely separately in all organisms as controlling aging. So this is one of the major pathways that actually we are talking about and excited about. Now, rapamycin is not the only one. There is a program at the NIH, run by the NIH, National Institutes of Health, that takes drug candidates that we think might be interfering with the aging process and actually does the study in mice. Study in mice are much more complicated. We've done in my lab one study looking at a lifespan. It took us 3.5 years, 4 years, more than $1.5 million, and I swore to myself I would never do one again because it was so painful, so much mind-numbing work, and it's watching these mice slowly die. But the NIH has established a facility called ITP, Intervention Testing Program, that allows you to nominate a candidate, and then they will actually test it. And using this, they found a whole bunch of drugs that actually increase lifespan in mice. And this is in multiple species and so on. And here are a few of them. Now, where this gets actually kind of interesting is some of these drugs already exist. They're available. Rapamycin being one of them. Rapamycin is actually sold as a drug called Rapamune. If you've had a kidney transplant, this is a drug that we use for suppress the immune system. So you eliminate the rejection process. But it's used at much higher doses that we use in the longevity field. So acarbose is another drug that's in the clinic that you can buy that is actually used as an anti-diabetic. Metformin is too. Glucophage. I suspect in a room this size, there might be one person on glucophage. And if you're taking it, congratulate yourself. But in addition to this, there's a whole slew of molecules that are slowly percolating in the system that at some point will see the light of day in humans. And I mentioned here, there are today over 100 interventions that can extend the health span of a mouse or the lifespan of them. 100 for a health span, less for the lifespan, about 10 that have been identified, increasing lifespan in mice. And as I mentioned, a number in the clinic for humans, but most of them not yet been pursued as targets for drug development. So the feeling that I want to give you is a sense of the pipeline. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of work percolating in the system that has led me to predict that within the next 5 to 10 years, we will have the first drug approved against aging, at least some manifestations of aging. We can talk about this later. Now, breakthrough number 2, which actually gets into what we're focused mostly at the back, is the whole idea of the geroscience hypothesis. So it turns out that aging is the biggest risk factor for a whole series of diseases that we know, all of us. We've seen it either in ourselves or in our parents or in our friends and so on. And they're listed here: heart attack, stroke, glaucoma, macular degeneration, many forms of cancer. Not all cancers. There's some cancers linked to children, some to middle age, but most of them linked to older age. Osteoarthritis, osteoporosis. This is the thing that is causing hip fractures and all of these problems, or knee problems. Hearing loss, sarcopenia, Alzheimer, Parkinson, type 2 diabetes. Now, the first time I gave a talk like this I think this was at Dominican University, and I had just gotten the job, and I asked everybody in the room, so who wants to live to 120? And can I ask you who wants to live to 120? A few, like the young people, they have not experienced yet what it is to age. And the reason that, now let me rephrase the question. Who wants to live to 120 in the same shape as when you were 50, surrounded by your friends and family unhealthy? So, of course. I mean, we all have this incredible craving for life. And it never goes away, and in some way it's the stuff that has made for literature, for all of this thing, this yearning for humans to live more fully and to live longer. So but right now we associate aging with this, and it's not fun, and it's incredibly prevalent, and it's going to bankrupt all of our social security systems. Right now, if you're 65 years old in America, you have 70% chance of carrying at least one of those. If you are 70 years old, you have 70% chance of carrying at least two of them. And they really are degrading the quality of your life. Now, I hope to convince you that this is an equation that we're trying to change. This is really, when we talk about live better, longer, everybody focuses on the longer, but I think it completely misses the point. We want to live better. You want to be able to live, to have a long life, full capacity of all of your abilities, and then a short demise. Because the other thing also I want you to know is we never talk about immortality in the field, even though the newspapers love to highlight this and think about the field as a bunch of lunatics who are working for immortality. There's not a serious person that ever thinks about this, and they're not my colleagues. They're selling books and supplements, but not us. We really are focusing on things that we can do today. So this link between aging and chronic disease is a concept that came out of both epidemiology, just looking at it, and you can see that as people age, they get more and more sick. But when I went to medical school, it was considered a non-modifiable risk factor. There are two, for example, heart disease, give you an example. You guys know all of the risk factors for heart disease. Smoking, inactivity, obesity, high cholesterol, and all of this. And that was the category of the modifiable risk factor. There was the category of non-modifiable risk factor, which would be your gender, although that's being changed now too, or your age. And I've just told you that we are at the point where we think we can start changing the way you're aging. Anybody on the statin in the room? Amazing. Congratulations, that's good. But statins are targeting cholesterol. Cholesterol as a risk factor is 7 times less important than your age. So imagine the consequence and the potential of this. Statins is a $20 billion market today in terms of the amount of drugs that are being sold to the whole country. And so imagine also the potential of someone who's going to find an intervention that targets aging. It's going to be the biggest drug that's ever been made. And by the way, Ozempic, some of you might have heard about this, is pointing its nose as a little bit of an anti-aging medicine, just getting hints that it might be functioning someone in this way. Okay, breakthrough number 3. When you think about this, we have a big problem. We have a chronic population that is afflicted with an increasing burden of chronic disease. This costs money. People are accessing the healthcare systems. We have a loss of productivity. People, are not able to continue working, or they do not want to continue working. I think my mic is going in and out.
Sometimes
It is.
it happens.
It's not my hearing.
No,
Let's try this. Testing. Can you hear in the back?
Yeah.
All right. And if that doesn't work, we'll flip the
Oh,
batteries.
super. Thank you.
The batteries are aging.
Can you hear me?
yes,
Can you hear me now?
no, I think you just turned it off.
No. You know what? Let's do this. Let's use the original mic with those batteries.
All right, this stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it's all right.
Yeah.
He still has the Kirkland batteries.
Oh, I don't know. If I speak up, can you hear me?
Yes.
While we changing this?
Doctor, we heard you before pretty well. There was some static, but we were able to hear.
It was just waiting. Wasn't here?
These are nice, maybe to get.
Okay, maybe we're just good to know. I'm sorry.
Just 1 second.
Okay, I'll speak up right now and we'll come back to something that will work better. Can you hear now?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody? Okay, good. The last concept, the breakthrough number 3, is that based on what I've just told you, we have the potential to reinvent medicine in a really different way. And I'll give you an example of why I think. So think about what we call healthcare today. It's actually not healthcare.
I think
Most
we
of
got it.
medicine today is.
Testing. All right. By the way, we checked the batteries before we started. We were assured that we had new batteries, so not my fault.
We're not into blaming, we're just into finding solutions. So think about the medical system the way it is today. We call it healthcare. It's not healthcare, it's sick care. Medicine focuses on you the day you become sick. And they do a very good job at this. I'm an MD. I'm not here to attack the medical world, because frankly, if I suffered from a heart attack, God forbid, I would go to the doctor. I would not come to the Buck Institute. So, this idea of sick care means it's an excessive focus on essentially disease. We have a National Institute of Health, but but it's actually in effect the National Institute of Disease. We spend half of our healthcare dollars on the last 2 years of life. Half. Now, imagine, a country, and just to reassure all of you, I'm not a communist, but a country like Cuba, which is considered as a model for healthcare in the developing world. They spend a 16th of what we do spend, and their lifespan is 4 years longer. 1/16. So I think this, and the reason why is they spend all of their money on prevention, everything. And God forbid, if you're 75 and you have a cancer, you're not going to get that extra 2 or 3 years that we would get here. But on the population level, it certainly serves their population better. And they export physicians across the whole world, the whole developing world. So not to say that I want us to become Cuba, but there are some important lessons for us to watch and to really incorporate into our system. So our system is sick care. It is organ-based. You go see a cardiologist, you go see a neurologist, you go see a pulmonologist, an ear and throat doctor. Every doctor has its own little organ. And many of them, unless you have an amazing general practitioner, doesn't really know anything about what other medicine you're taking. So he's treating the organ. And by the way, this organ-based approach to medicine dates back to the 1600s, when people first dissected humans and realized there's a heart, there's this. And so whole medicine has been based on this antiquated vision of how we function. And remember, I told you, TOR is not only in the heart or in the brain, it's in every one of your cells. That means, what the science of aging is bringing is a new understanding of biology, that the factors that are causing aging in your brain are the same that are factors that are causing aging in your liver or your spleen and so on. So, I'll expand on this in 1 minute. Our system is reactive also, not proactive. We manage diseases. Reactive, we wait for people to actually fall ill. You are considered sick until at 60, God forbid, you have a heart attack. And your risk of dying of that heart attack is close to 40% for an initial heart attack. Think about this. What kind of a medical system is this? So if you survive, wonderful, we have the best that you can possibly get. And actually the survival rates of heart attack keeps increasing. But remember, the clock keeps ticking. As you age, your major risk factor is still the same. So if you were at risk for a heart attack, you're likely to be at risk for all of the other complications, because all of these diseases go together with the aging process. So, and it's universal. We treat pretty much everybody with the same treatment, almost. We heard about a group of us who are on statins. By the way, I should have raised my hand too, because I take one too. But you probably are not aware that out of 10 people who take a statin, only 1 benefits from it. And all the other 9 will take a medicine for 20 years, 30 years, and will never benefit from it. Now, why do we do this? It's because we don't know how to recognize who will benefit, who will not. And the way clinical trials are done, it's by law of numbers. We just do a trial on 50,000 people, and if we have a signature of a group, 500 die here and 150 die here, well, mission accomplished. The medicine is administered to everybody. That number that I gave you for statins is true for every single medicine that's in the market today. And it's actually, it's not the fault of big pharma. You know, people are easy to point out and say they're profiteering. No, we just don't know how to do this. And this is where the last step I'll be making is going to be critical, which is what we call precision medicine. So where are we moving to? We need to have true healthcare. And I used to say when I started this job, and I was still naive, that we have to reform medicine. And I've become convinced we will not reform medicine. We're going to put them out of business. So that's a different approach, because frankly, and you have to be aware of this, and this is a society we live in. There's a whole economic system that is centered around the way the thing works, and with a lot of people doing very well. Doctors, hospitals, pharma, biotech, that whole ecosystem is living and thriving on this. And to come and to say you're going to change it, to revolutionize it, is very naive, not going to happen. And I see this even when talking to my colleagues in in medicine. They are reluctant to all of the ideas that we push in, not proven, because they realize if we are successful, and I have no doubt that we will change the equation. And so the idea, I blew up my most important slide. I hope you haven't looked. So what we're going to go to is to a system base. I'll go back to TOR, which I talked about early a little bit. This idea is that instead of focusing on the liver or on the spleen, the mechanisms that drive aging in all of these organs are not identical, but they're similar. And TOR is a good example. When you inhibit TOR with rapamycin, you actually slow down aging in every single organ. And so this is what I mean by system-based. System biology is a study of all of these systems that regulate our cell functioning. It's going to go from reactive to proactive. And instead of doing disease management, we're going to do true prevention. And finally, instead of being universal, everybody getting the same drug, whether it's going to work for you or not, it's going to be personalized and precision and much more precise. All of these are areas on which we are working. That's really gives you a framework of what the buck is all about. Oops, again. Now let's move on to the last part, which I think before I talk a little bit about the buck. Which is, I've blown up my slides, so some of the smartest one around you have already looked at. We're talking about drugs, we're talking about genetic engineering. The question is always, what can I do today to actually change the way I'm aging. And I'll ask the question anyway. So there are two broad types of forces that are at work in terms of your longevity. One is your genetics, what you've inherited from your parents. The other one is the environment, either the air you breathe, the food you eat, whether you're exercising, all of these external variation. Just would like to ask you, if you've seen the slide, don't say anything. If you haven't, tell me, what do you think is the role of genetics? Is it predominant? Who thinks it's predominant? Whether your parents live. Okay, everybody's looked at the slide. So all right. So most important slide: 7% of your aging is genetic, and that's, to me, this is very recent data from collaborators here in the Bay Area. This is completely different from what people used to assume. A lot of people have a very fatalistic view of their own aging. My parents didn't live old, or my parents didn't live old, so therefore I'm good. And so most people actually go through life really not being aware that it's all in your hands, it's in my hands. So how you're going to age is a choice, it's a decision. And it's not only, one of the things that I've come to realize, not only how you're going to age is how you actually live. Because living healthy, I can attest to it, and I see this every day, is an incredible gift. And most people go through life sort of blind to the idea that how they live really affects their performance, how they feel, and ultimately how long they're going to live and how well they're going to age. So this is really, if you're going to remember one number for this whole lecture, this is it. It also is the one that says that there's incredible potential to change the way we age. And again, we see the obesity epidemic in the country growing and growing. Our lifespan now is lagging by 5 to 6 years behind most of the Western world. And I mean, it's a catastrophe if you think about it, because it's only going to get worse. You just travel across the country and you will see the level of obesity has really reached a pandemic type of state, which is not discussed enough. Instead, we have, body affirming movements and all of this, instead of really looking at what the root problem is and trying to solve it. Now, Europe, where I'm from, loves to say, well, these are the fat Americans and, they eat their McDonald's and all this. I can tell you, and I love to go back and tell them, I've seen the curves. Europe is just 5 to 10 years behind. And so it's except maybe for France, doing something right. And it's not the red wine. Sorry to disappoint you. But most of the world, especially linked with development, becomes more obese. And in large part, I blame the food industry. And we can talk about this again. I think this is one of the significant problems that we have. We're being tempted and inundated with incredibly unhealthy food. Who has read Michael Pollan's book? Good. Well, for those of you who haven't, ask your friends. I think they must be reading. He wrote a little book called What to Eat, 100 pages. You can buy it on Amazon. It has most amazing advice. I mean, it might be totally common sense, but obviously it's not for many people. One of them that was my favorite is, you should never eat anything that you could buy in a gas station. Or you should never eat anything that comes out of a window. That's another one. Finally, you should never eat something that your grandmother would not recognize as food. So if you already follow these three concepts, you're already doing a lot better than most people. And frankly, Michael Pollan, great little book. I would say should be must read in every high school, but it's not, unfortunately. Okay, so as we think about the environment and what you are supposed to do to actually increase your health span and your lifespan. So health span is the healthy years of life. For most people in America, it's 64, and that's 64, and in the mid 60s. And life expectancy is 77. So most of us spend 10 to 15 to 20 years afflicted by these diseases. Now, one last thing you might ask if you were skeptical, what gives you the impression that we can actually change this? Well, there are humans among us, the centenarians, defined by the fact that they're living to 100. They not only live longer, but the fraction of their time that they live occupied by these or afflicted by these conditions is 5%. 5 years. The typical centenarians will live in really great health until 95 and 5 years of short demise. Think about so 95, that's their as long as they live. For us, it would be 65. It's 30 years delta. And that's an amazing now. You know, obviously centenarians is the only exception to what I've told you. To become a centenarian most of the time, you need strong genes. They are lucky. They inherit some amazing genes. And actually, when you look at the lifestyle of centenarians, many of them actually don't have a particularly healthy lifestyle. One of my good friends in New York has one of the largest cohorts of centenarians in the world. And in one family, there's 4 siblings who all live between 102 to 110. And so obviously very strong genetic background. And he tells me there was the last daughter or the last daughter who did not want to be part of the cohort. And finally he got to go and meet her. And he walks into her apartment and she's 102 and she opens the door with a cigarette in her mouth. And he looks at her and says, Esther, I mean, you are smoking. And you know, anyway, he was just completely dumbfounded. And have you ever considered quitting? And she looked at him and she said, honey, I've had 4 doctors before you. They all told me to quit smoking and they're all dead. One of my favorite stories. So what can you do today? And this is obviously, if you invite me back, I'll give you a whole lecture on the 5 pillars of aging, which is basically what are the factors that you have in your hands to actually modulate. The drugs are here, and everybody wants the Buck Institute to come up with a pill that's going to make you live forever. And it's not going to happen anytime soon. It will happen. There will be interventions. There will be drugs that will help us. I have no doubt about this. And I would say I've predicted within the next 5 to 10 years. In the meantime, what can you do today? I think about these as accounts. I think if you have an investment portfolio, you have different accounts. You invest, you diversify. That means you try to touch every one of these pillars, and you do it long term. So, and I don't mean to say that it's too late because it's never too late. And that's one thing we see, even interventions in people older than 70. I heard recently about a man who was brought by his grandson to his training rowing, and they convinced him to get on an erg machine to start rowing, and he just changed his life. At 72, he started rowing. At 95, now he's like the world champion in his age category rowing. And you should see his pictures. It's an article in the New York Times. I'm not making it up. Just amazing transformation. Someone who probably would have gone down very quickly. So what are these accounts or these buckets? Listed here. Nutrition, obviously, is one of the big ones. And it's not the diet that you eat. It doesn't matter. Paleo, keto, whatever else you want to come up with, you know, the moniker that you want to have, vegan, vegetarian, there's no strong evidence that any of these diets is linked to increased longevity. Might be, some of them might be, there's obviously some toxic diets. If you're eating sausage and bacon every day, I can guarantee you it's not going to be a longevity diet. But if you have a well-balanced diet with, you know, quality ingredients, it doesn't matter what you eat. Our bodies are equipped to eat everything in moderation. But obviously the composition, how much protein, how much fiber, how much fast carbohydrates, all of these things are the key variables. So it's not so much, there is no, you know, one of the interesting things about many of these diets is they restrict carbohydrates, because carbohydrates, fast carbohydrates, bread, you know, pizza or pasta, all of the things that we like in large amounts, especially without any fat on them, will raise your blood sugar and it will cause problem in the long term. So that's one category. Again, Michael Pollan, really interesting book to read. Physical activity is probably, I think it's my favorite, because it's not the great eraser, but people who, and when I talk physical activity, people think, oh my God, I don't like to go to the gym, I don't like to sweat. This is not for me. But 25 minutes to 30 minutes of walking every day will decrease your year-over-year risk of all of the disease that I've showed you by 40%. So just keep that number in your head. And I say, who cannot walk, 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night? And especially if you do it briskly, that's the great eraser. Greatest gift we have. We are mobile animals. It's only in this society that we're sitting in cars and sitting at chairs. I mean, our ancestors were roaming the earth, moving around, transporting things. We have machines for everything. We don't exert ourselves anymore. And you don't need to go to the gym and to actually get the benefits. So that's really the most important. Never too late to start. The most important thing you can do today. And my recommendation to people is always do this so that you can be there when these are coming in the future. Sleep is one of my favorite, because we have a chronically sleep deprived society. I've seen the numbers, 65 to 70% of people are sleep deprived. If you cannot sit in a dark room in a movie theater at 7 p.m. without falling asleep, you are sleep deprived. That's it. You have to really look at it and say, when you are sleeping enough? Why are we not sleeping enough? It used artificial light. This is only something new. And now the phones and the screens, which irradiate blue light into your eyes and trigger all of your wake-up mechanisms. And we see this now in teenagers who have problems sleeping. There's nothing that depresses more than to go into a Walgreens or CVS and see these rows of, you've seen these medicine called Z's or melatonin, where people are taking 5 milligrams of melatonin. By the way, another thing I want you to remember, that's 5,000 times more than what your body normally makes. So why are we selling these doses of melatonin? This is not, this is crazy. Instead of taking a 10 minutes walk and turning down the light. So there's a lot of things that are crazy when you start really digging into them. And the last one is actually the most important. Anybody cares to say what you think it is? Human connection. That's the biggest factor in terms of determining your longevity. Comes out of multiple studies, and we've seen, and it can be your wife, it can be your girlfriend, it can be your children, it can be all of the above. The more social you are. We even see, I have a pet peeve about alcohol, because I think it's been sold to us as something that increases your longevity. It doesn't. It's a toxin. So it doesn't mean that you should not drink it, because when we drink it, we are socializing. And many of the people who like drinking a little bit will drink moderately in the presence of friends. But don't drink to make yourself healthy, because that will not work. Not necessary. Now, look at the consequences of what happened with the pandemic. I mean, justifiably so, we will all asked to stay at home and to diminish our interactions. I worked behind a Zoom camera, for close to 3 years. I got depressed. I mean, not clinically depressed, but I just felt pretty bad, even though I was thinking, still working, but I just did not feel good. We have an epidemic of loneliness and depression across the whole country that we still have not recuperated from. And we see this again, lifespan decreasing. So my rule for everyone is, when you think about an intervention, if you are vegan, no gluten, and you do all of those potential things, and some people have to do this for medical reason, but if your dietary limitations are so complicated that nobody will invite you for dinner, just think about it. I've invited some friends, and then you get a list, have peanut allergy and I have this, and then you're thinking, well, what am I gonna be able to feed you? So think about whatever, these have in terms of the human relations. And this is true not only for the dietary restriction, which are real for some people. I don't mean to be making fun of them, but I know a couple of people who are so complicated that I'm thinking, when we invite them to the house, it's always, well, what are we gonna cook? And anyway, so think about all of these as 5 different accounts. The amazing thing is that they stack up. So if you are doing all of them, there's 15 years, 12 to 15, depending on people, of extra healthy life. So think about this. Most people, in this community will live to probably 80, 81. Yeah.
I think it might be your clicker. When it gets close, it makes it.
Oh, it interferes?
Yeah.
Okay, I will try this time. You're totally right. I've noticed sometimes it just, okay, got it. Thank you. You're an engineer? That's probably some kind of electrical interference. Okay, so I realize I'm actually running out of time. For me, this is really my passion, especially to speak to the public. And frankly, I don't do it justice today because there's a whole series of easy recommendations that we can. And I hope this conversation will serve as an incentive for you to join our community, as I'll talk in a few minutes, and to actually, because this is what we do at the PAC. When you come for visit, when you join all the seminars and all the lectures, all of this is what you're going to be learning about. Okay, so
What was the last picture? It looked like a piece of puffy pie.
that's a pill. Not a pie, sorry to disappoint you. It's a pill, medicine. Okay, just a few words about the PAC. Some of you, I suspect that everyone knows about us, but anybody who doesn't know us, you want me to go through this? Okay, I'll share. Just to let you know, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, which is actually pretty We're gonna have a party. We don't know exactly what, but it will be a party. I also have to make a sad comment, those of you who follow us closely probably know this. We lost Judy Campisi this year. She was our dean of faculty, our most famous faculty at the BUC, actually. Amazing scientist. Everybody heard about zombie cells? Yeah, these senescent cells. She actually discovered that whole field. And this is a field in which thousands of people actually are working today. She passed away way too early. I think she was in her early 70s from a lung disease, and we really miss her a lot. We had a couple of events to celebrate her, and always very moving to see her. And it's only been 3 months, Brian? And so anyway, life goes on. We will foster the new generation. Okay, so just want to give you a sense also of where we're going. I joined in 2016, and this is our operating budget. So just want to leave you with the sense that we're in a rapid growth. We've gone from 32 million a year to 56 this year and projected at 65 next year, which is good news. It's a reflection of what's happening in the field. There's a lot of interest. There's another day that I don't see another article in the New Yorker or New York Times about the longevity field. Our NIH funding has gone up as well from 12 million a year to about 27.4 million. This is probably the number I'm the most proud of because it really establishes the fact that our science is recognized by our colleagues and by the government as being something important. So this is not fringe work. It's becoming mainstream medical research. And I think this is really important. And there's a National Institute of Aging at the NIH called NIA. We receive much of our funding from them. We also have grown our collaborations with corporate partners. So these are companies that are in the biotech world that are interested in partnering with us, or these are companies that we're starting with our own science, which is an important aspect. Because remember, a not-for-profit research organization has its role for doing the initial research you want to bring it to market, the amount of capital that you need and the resources are completely different. And this is why we're spinning out company. It's not out of greed. It's out of recognition that, you know, to put a drug on the market today costs about $1 billion. So there's no research institute that's ever going to be doing this, and none of them do. We hand it to commercial partners who raise money from VCs and from the other partners. So this is why we're doing this, and we've gone from 3 million to 12 million this year. Okay, our mission very quickly. I realize it's 1:30. You tell me to shut up because I will continue on and on.
We need
Okay.
to have room for
I can
questions.
continue for about 10-15 minutes if it works for you, and then I have to rush 5 minutes. So we have two broad missions. One is the research, and we've hinted to this, which is basic and translational. Basic is our history. Translational is where we go. Translational means taking all of these discoveries that have been made in the fruit fly and the worm and bringing them to humans. That's the hard part of this whole work, because it's a lot harder, and there's an issue of safety also. We don't want to recommend something that's going to, you know, disturb your life, actually decrease your life expectancy. So we have to be a lot more careful with humans than we are with flies. And finally, education for us is very critical as well, because first it's one of the two pillars. And it involves not only educating undergraduate students, PhD students, postdocs, but also educating the public. I think one of the parts that I never expected I would enjoy so much in this work is actually talk to people like you and to see how much hunger and how much interest there is in what we bring into the whole picture. So clinical research comes to the buck. I told you I'm going to go pretty quickly, so to give you a very quick overview. One of the things that we've talked about is this idea that moving from the basic science to the translation. One of the things that is happening right now is the field is getting a little bit ahead of itself, selling a lot of supplements. You probably have some friends who are taking this and that. And the question when you're buying a supplement is always wondering, is it proven or is it just being sold? You can sell a lot of things without any proof that it does anything. Usually no harm, but certainly not efficacy. And so we've taken a really strong approach to testing many of these supplements using clinical trials. The same clinical trials that are applied to drug development, we apply them to supplements. So that we're going to be able to our own supplement that we've invented to determine at the end, this thing actually works. And I can recommend it for you to take it. And so one of these trials, by the way, there's a website, a page on our website that you can go to and sign up. If you become a member of our community, you will learn about all of this as well. This trial is called Takeoff. It's conducted by John Newman and Brianna Stubbs, faculty colleague and a senior scientist. And we're doing a clinical trial to test some molecules that we've invented, and more details in the future about this. We've also recruited a superstar. You might not know this. At the back, Lee Hood is probably one of the most decorated scientists in American medicine today, and he's at the back. He's not here full time, but I haven't given up. And he's here quite frequently. He has his operation. We have merged with his group called Phenome Health. And we've created together a Center for Phenomic Health at the back. And we're in the process of making another recruitment, by the way, for which we are fundraising. So if you have got some resources burning the bottom of your pockets, help us out. We want to build a Center for Phenomic Health. What is phenomic health? It is the idea of deep phenotyping. That means doing studies of the aging process with as many approaches as we can, measuring everything that we can. Because right now, if you go to see your doctor, all of his diagnostic is based probably on 100 labs at the most. In the lab, if I draw blood from you, if any one of you, I could measure tens of thousands of variables, tens of thousands. So there's an incredible discrepancy between what we can do in the lab and what we use in the clinic. So in some way, I tell people, it's like we're looking into a room through the keyhole. And so of course, we only see that little part. Open the door. This is what the science is all about. So the Center for Phenomic Health will really help us to really understand what are all the variables that are predictive of different types of disease and so on. Public education, again, public tours, field trips, community engagement. It is critical for an organization like us to have the public behind us. Come and visit, come and volunteer as docent, come participate to the seminar. I can guarantee you we will make it worth your while. And Brian is here. He's going to stay probably a little bit behind. Brian Van Weel, who's our head of philanthropy, is going to stay behind. He is not going to ask you for any money, so don't be afraid. But he's here a little bit to sort of build the relationship and you know, have you come to the Institute, sign up to the website. There's so many ways in which, tell your friends. If every one of you leaving this room today would just go back and tell 5 friends, I was at the seminar with this funny speaking guy, so I'm talking about aging, and it's amazing what they do at the Buck. This is how we're gonna you know, increase our reach and really let people know about what we do. I still find it personally amazing that people still come up to me and says, "You work up there? I'm always wondering, what are you guys doing up there?" and this leaves room, you know, now there's a sign on the road, there's a sign on the highway. I think people are just not, some people have told me they thought it was a mental hospital. It's just really, and I'm the doctor. Okay, the last one is the impact circle, which is a great way to engage the community also. This is something that was the creation of Brian, which was, imagine a competition where a scientist will come and pitch you science, and if you contribute financially, we will take the pool of money that we raise from the group, and that money actually will be used to conduct the research. And so it's a great way if you have a little more resources and you want to participate, to really be part of you'll get updates, you'll get a feeling for what's happening in the lab. So I think the people who are part of a community doing this just love it. And I think we want to grow it. Okay, last but not least, thank you for being here, for listening. If you have a cell phone, if you've never seen this, you can point your camera onto this little square there that has all my contact information. Download it, send us an email, and I'll be happy to talk to you. Thank you. Is it time for question? Yeah.
Let me see if we can do this. Okay, we are here for a couple more minutes with questions with Dr. Verdin, and then he's going to have to run off to his next adventure. But why don't we get started here?
Thanks, this has been terrific. Can you hear me?
Yes,
It's
So-
a pretty weak mic, so.
So,
I can repeat the question.
so if my cholesterol is going down and the statin is working, why would someone take the statin if their cholesterol wasn't going down?
Because it means that your cholesterol that was not a risk factor for you for heart disease. So it doesn't matter what your cholesterol was.
See if that-
Makes sense?
Yeah.
Yes,
I've recently watched this series, The Blue Zones,
yes.
and I'm wondering how that relates to the Buck Institute studies, and if you've done some research in those blue zones as well.
Good point. I like and I don't like the blue zone at the same time. Dan Buettner is a journalist, not a scientist, who came up with the concept of the blue zone, went around the world and tried, for those of you who haven't heard, and tried to decide, are there long living communities around the world? And if yes, how do they live? Can we learn something from them? And he did this, and he identified a number of blue zones: Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, some islands in, I believe, Crete or Greece, some place, Loma Linda in California. So there's a whole bunch of these areas. The problem is when people have started crushing here, so they have apparently an abnormal number of centenarians. And Dan Buettner has published a number of papers, books, which are not reviewed, by the way, where he claimed, that these people have this lifestyle. And by the way, this is all what I've told you about. This is stuff that we knew from the field of research. So the problem is that when people have started scratching behind the surface and gone back to look at those population registry, really people do not believe that many of these areas are truly blue zone. They truly have an abnormal number of them, especially the one in Costa Rica in more developed world, developing world. Now, Okinawa seems to be one that is backing up again.
Yes.
I don't think this is the clicker. Anyway, so the concept of the blue zone is highly, most people in the scientific field don't believe that. Now, what Dan Buettner is doing now, he's taking the concept and he's going into communities and trying to implement the blue zone principles, which is basically healthy living of what I've told you, into existing communities. And I think that I completely support. I think so scientifically, not very strong, probably not true. But in terms of the impact on society, this is exactly what I think we should be doing. Yes,
Question over here.
yes.
Yes, I'm 85 and hopefully living a fairly good life. One of the things I do is keep bees and
To do
keep bees, honeybees.
Oh, okay, yes.
And about 4 or 5 years ago, a couple of guys came to us that had just been hired by Buck
Yes,
to learn about bees because bees age very differently. The summer bees live 30 days and winter bees live 6 months. There's really not much difference. And we said, keep in touch, tell us what you've learned, and I've never heard back. So are you aware?
I actually, the day before yesterday, I was walking around the institute and I ran into two of the postdocs. We're not hiding anything. I think they probably have not reached any kind of conclusion. There's two aspects to the bee which are absolutely amazing. One is the queen bee and the workers, where they all have the same DNA but end up living completely different lives and they look different and so on. So I think there's a lot of interest in this. Yet another model that I've described, to the ones that we study to understand what is aging. But
They are still there and.
they're still there and they're still working, absolutely. But I would say an idea in the lab to a concept to finding something to writing a paper on average is 5 years. So I don't know when they came to see you. So it's probably still early in the whole thing. Yes.
Am I correct that Dr. Hood was the author of The Science of Aging? The
Doc-
book that was recently published, and I thought economics was involved in that.
I did not hear Dr. Whom?
Hood,
Lee Hood just wrote a beautiful book. If you really want to learn about what I've talked about, and it's called The Science of Wellness.
Science of Wellness.
It's written by Lee Hood and Nathan Price. It's available from Harvard Press.
Yeah, excellent book. I thought it was very informational. So will he be bringing that concept of the gut genome and AI and the
Yes.
phenotypes and everything?
Yes.
Genetic phenotype.
Yes.
Wow,
So actually,
wonderful.
if you think about what he's bringing along with Nathan Price is a bioinformatic AI-based huge program. Now, remember what I told you? Your doctor looks at, when he draws blood, 100 variables. I told you, and being a trained physician, I can look at these 100 variables individually and say, this happened, this looks, blood sugar is abnormal, and so on. When we're generating data on the scale at which I described earlier, where each blood draw, we get 100,000 data points. There's no mind that can comprehend this. The only way we cannot even discern patterns. So the only way to actually start digging into this is AI. And this is what this whole phenomic revolution is. And Lee comes frequently at the back. We had him speak at one of our events not so long ago. And this is what he and his team are building. By the way, he's 85 years old. And he does 150 push-ups every morning. I've seen it, so. But he believes in the whole thing, so it does work.
What's the name of the book again?
The Science of Wellness.
So wonderful talk, by the way. Yeah, okay, it's on. Question on, one of your slides showed calorie restriction, but what percentage calorie restriction were you describing with that?
So there are, calorie restriction has what we call it's a curve like this. If you look at nutrition, so am I looking at this way? Yeah, this way. So if you don't eat enough, you have malnutrition. Okay, so clearly you cannot restrict calorie. If you go up to a maximum, you get calorie restriction. If you go up a little bit down the line, this is what we do. Most of us eat just a little bit too much. If you go further down the line, this is obesity. So think about the relationship, and actually this is one thing that's important to consider as you do everything in terms of longevity. The dose response curves are not linear. That means better is not always, more is not always better. As we say in French, my French colleague has disappeared. He's not there anymore. Le mieux est l'ennemi du bien. Better is the enemy of good. That means, if you're exercising and you're doing 30 to 1 hour a day, you're probably at an hour, you're probably reaching the peak. If you start doing ultra marathon or even marathon, you're probably not doing the best thing for your health. The same thing if you, there are so many interventions. By the way, another thing that's really interesting is the whole concept of hormesis. Anybody has heard what hormesis is? So this idea that by stressing yourself mildly, you are actually increasing your resilience, your resistance. And I'll give you a few examples. Exercise is a stress. When you exercise, you're stressing your body. And so a little bit of dose of that stress will increase your strength. What happens when you exercise? You stress your muscles, they will go a little bigger, you'll go stronger. Hot tubbing. Anybody has a hot tub at home or likes it, or sauna? This is a heat stress. Clear indication from Finland that sauna, for example, increases lifespan, protects against Alzheimer's, against type 2 diabetes, against osteoporosis, all of these interventions. The more, the study coming out of Finland showing the more frequently people do it a week, the less they have a risk factor. And I think this is something that Marin would stand up and cheers, but I don't even hear this. So let me see. The new thing, cold plunge. Anybody has done a cold plunge? Yeah, I love cold plunge. That's, again, if you go 3 minutes in a cold plunge, once a day, you're probably going to really help your immune system and all of this. If you stay in it for 45 minutes, like Wim Hof, I'm not sure that he's actually really helping himself. So think about all these interventions as you eating vegetables. You might not even know this, but do you know that vegetables do not like to be eaten? Why not? Well, if you're a vegetable, and I mean eaten not by us, but by insects. If you have an insect that comes and eats on your leaf, eventually you're going to die. So what do plants do? They have invented a whole series of microtoxins for vegetable, for insects. Many of these toxins work for us also, which is actually quite interesting, which means, the virtue of eating vegetables is why is it so healthy to eat them? And I suspect, and there's a lot of data showing that some of these compounds actually triggering a mild stress response. And we've even identified the factors that are responsible for this. So you can think about a lot of the anti-aging intervention in the same way, except maybe for human relationships. I'm not sure that.
So is there time for one more?
Yeah, one more.
Okay, right.
I was just wondering how much the field of epigenetics crosses over into what you're doing.
I'm an epigeneticist. This is what completely. So epigenetics is, maybe I'll just define it for the rest of the group. You probably have heard the term. It's everybody uses it. Half of the people do not really know what it means, but it's a key term. So you have a genome. That's the book, the sequence of your DNA. Every cell in your body has the same DNA. So how does your body make a brain cell, a heart cell, a cell from the different types? It's via epigenetics. Epigenetics means on the side of genetics. Genetics is the DNA, epi is on the side, and it's the regulatory mechanism that allows each cell to become very differentiated. Now it turns out this whole process of cell identity, how cells define themselves, white blood cells or red blood cells, carries your oxygen via hemoglobin. How do they maintain their identity is by keeping these regulatory mechanisms tight. And what happens during aging is that the whole epigenetic process kind of gets a little loosey-goosey, and so your red cells might start expressing some things that should be normally in the brain, and it's not carrying oxygen as well. The same thing, your cell in the brain that should be remembering your phone number, or you put your keys, is actually, starting to act like a red blood cells. So there's a slow erosion of this whole cell identity process during aging. Now, the other place where epigenetic is important is all of these outside interventions that we've talked about, how exercise, all work through epigenetics. Okay, so, and that's what my lab actually works on, the role of nutrition in regulating these epigenetic regulators and therefore determining the way we age.
We are very lucky to have had Dr. Verdin for a little over time. He's got to run now. I want to say thank you for an amazing presentation. Love to have you back again. Who would come again? I think so. All right,
I'm
well,
pretty sorry I have to run, but I have to be at another meeting.
No, you're fine.
I'd love to mingle, but next time we'll leave it on.
you gave us more time than we booked it for, so we thank you. Thanks to Dr. Verdin. Oh, and there's your wine, don't forget. It's actually a pretty nice white.
I will drink it.
All right, well, that wraps us up. I want to say thanks for everybody for staying a little late. And forget everything you just heard because there's some extra cheesecake to take home. If you would like, seriously, several tables have it. Just grab it, take it home. I hate to see it go to waste. Thanks for coming, everybody.